Welcome to Book to Bestseller TV. Today I am sitting here with Jason Silverberg. Jason is a CFP, CLU, ChFC, and he specializes in comprehensive financial planning. His practice aims at helping families and small business owners fit their financial pieces together to create financial freedom. He uses a values-based process to connect with his clients on a deeper level than some advisors, diving into the why behind the numbers. He focuses on helping clients achieve and protect their goals through methodical investment strategies, calculated risk management, and insurance solutions. Jason is a registered representative of Securian Financial Services Incorporated, member FINRA/SIPC. Woo! Financial Advantage Associates is independently owned and operated. And Jason, your book is The Financial Planning Puzzle, Fitting Your Pieces Together to Create Financial Freedom. So tell us about the book and tell us some of the wonderful things you teach in the book and, just some of your tips and tricks.
Sure. Yeah. So the book is a labor of love. I've put a lot of time and energy, 18 months of writing into it and editing. But I don't just treat it as 18 months. I treat it as a lifetime because I've always wanted to write a book since even high school. My friends used to joke around with me that I was the 40-year-old man stuck in an 18-year-old body. But, my background is that when I was 13, I had a bar mitzvah, and my parents gave me the gift money from that bar mitzvah and said, go invest it. So I learned at a very young age how to make money in the stock market, and I actually bought my first car with my investment earnings. And I said, you know what? I got to do this for other people. I got to help people with their money. And I knew I wanted to help the world. I wanted to make the world a better place, but I wanted to do it with money because that's what excited me. So throughout college, I took some internships and learned about the financial services industry. And I found your Financial Advantage, where I'm working now, when I was a senior in college, interned here and started my practice right out of college. And that was almost 13 years ago now. So it's been a great ride. And I've learned so much in the last 13 years, and I still have tons left to learn. But I basically packaged up all of that knowledge into the book, The Financial Planning Puzzle. And the goal with the Financial Planning Puzzle isn't to be your end-all, be-all solve, magic bullet, but it's there for you as a coach, as a resource guide, to answer a lot of your financial questions. It's not meant to replace a financial planner because obviously when you sit down with a financial planner, they get to know you on a customized individual level, learning about your unique challenges and your unique financial situation. But the book is meant to take this gargantuan elephant and break it down into bite-sized pieces. And really that's kind of the metaphor throughout the book is how do you put your financial puzzle together? When you do a puzzle, Lisa, have you ever done a puzzle before?
Yes, love puzzles.
Most people have. So what you end up doing with a puzzle is you pour all the pieces of the puzzle onto the table and you look at it and you're just like, I'm never going to be able to do this. It's so overwhelming. So that's what people do with their financial plan. They pour all their financial puzzle pieces on the table and they're just like, there's no way. I'm so overwhelmed. How do I pay my credit card off while I'm saving for retirement in college? And how do I make my mortgage payment? How do I get ahead in my career and build my business? There's just so much to it. So really when you sit down and you do a puzzle, the best way to do it is you sit down and you look for like pieces, different colors that are the same. Or maybe you look for the four corner pieces first. You're ultimately creating a strategy for putting your plan together. The other thing you want to do is look at the picture on the box and use that as your guide. And when you do your financial plan, I think, and one of the biggest takeaways in this book is starting with your vision, starting with what you want life to look like in the future, and say maybe it's 20 years from now, 5 years from now, or maybe it's just a year from now. You're trying to get out of credit card debt or something. Figure out what that end goal is, and then work backwards to figure out how you're going to get there. And so I know we say that a lot when it comes to writing, let's take that big goal and break it down into bite-sized pieces. But I think it applies with your money too, and really understanding where do you want to get to with your financial life and where are you today? And that's really step two in the process, is really figuring out what are the pieces in the plan that you have right now. Maybe you're missing some puzzle pieces. Maybe you bought an IRA or have an IRA that you were contributing to 10 years ago and you still don't really know where that fits. Maybe you bought a life insurance policy when your kids were born and you don't know where that fits. Maybe you've changed jobs a couple times and you don't really know, why you're investing in this 401k, and there's no coordination between all of your puzzle pieces. And so the financial planning puzzle really helps you to solidify a plan and understand each of the financial puzzle pieces, each of their roles, and how they fit together for your specific financial situation.
Right. So one of the things in your bio was values-based investing and values-based planning. So I'm getting that that's kind of what you mean, because it's not one size fits all. And I think a lot of times when you read a financial book or, you get advice, it can be so cookie cutter, you need to do this and this and this. So I like that approach where, you're really looking at what your goals are and where you're at currently, and does this puzzle piece even fit? Does this IRA even fit for me anymore? So that's really an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, and one other thing on that topic, though, I work with a lot of people who come to me demotivated and just emotionally overwhelmed by their financial situation, and not just taking it, 12 months from now or 5 years from now and breaking it down into bite-sized pieces, but there's a step two to that process, and that's creating financial flow. I coined that term in the book. I'm trademarking it and everything, but it's kind of a cool concept where it's the flow that you're doing day in and day out. The financial habits and the financial decisions that you make are congruent with the values that you hold true, which are congruent with your ultimate vision for your financial life. So imagine that let's pretend like you're trying to train for a marathon, right? So when you train for the marathon, you got to exercise and you have to eat healthy. And really, if you're not doing those things, then you're setting yourself behind. Well, training for that marathon, if you're in the moment and you're aware and you're mindful that you're actually doing the work that you need to be doing, you're exercising, you're eating healthy, and you're running and you're training, and you're feeling good, hey, I did what I was supposed to do. That's going to give you more motivation to keep you moving forward in that direction. And same thing with the financial plan. If you start to see that your budget is working and you start to see that you're making dents in your financial goals and you're starting to see that you're paying off your credit card debt, it's giving you motivation and it's fueling you to give you a feedback loop of motivation and putting you on a path to financial success. So definitely figuring out where you are in the future, figuring out where you are today, and ultimately trying to create that financial flow is part of the big picture in the financial planning puzzle.
Yeah, I love that concept you've termed financial flow, because I can understand that feedback loop. When you finally are seeing some progress and getting out of debt or building a safety net or building your retirement fund, that's got to feel fantastic. And it must be fun for you as a financial planner to get to help families with that. Like, let's get out of the part where you're just stuck and you're overwhelmed and there's more month at the end of the money, and let's get you to a place where you actually can be excited about your financial future. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that was the reason why I got into this career to begin with, is to help people. So when I can see all that planning work, then it's phenomenal. And all the planning that we did for contingencies. If you get laid off, if there's a death in the family, if your kids end up not going to college. I've had some clients where you've saved for college in a 529 college savings plan, they end up not going to college. Okay, so now what do we do with the money that's in there? So, it's great that we saved, but now it's stuck and, pay some penalties and taxes and stuff. So, there's a lot of contingency planning when it comes to financial planning, and it's not just, it's great, we retired and everything's great. Well, some of the challenges life happens and we have to prepare for it. And,
sure.
that's another spot where I actually feel good that, we've stress tested the plan so that if a recession happens and you're retiring in 2008, or happens, we have a plan for it, and we've created a moat around your financial fortress. And that's one of those big things that we try and focus on, is how to make sure we're eliminating risk, whether it's we insure the risk, whether it's diversify the risk with investments, or whether it's, hey, let's take that risk, but let's self-insure. Maybe we have 100 grand in cash, believe it or not. There's some people who say, I'm going to absorb that risk and not buy any insurance, but if I have an issue, well, I have cash in my account to be able to absorb that risk. So we're stress testing the plan, we're absorbing risk, we're managing risk, and we're making sure that, whether the financial plan goes straight and we hit our goal quickly, or whether we zigzag and we detour along the way, we're going to end up getting to the place that we wanted to at the end of the day. So that's ultimately where we're going.
Okay, so that led me to two questions. The first one is, what do you say to families who are strapped for cash? You hear those statistics that people are, a paycheck away from going bankrupt. I mean, those scare tactic type little sound bites, but that's the reality for a lot of people, is that if you lost your job tomorrow, you're stuck. Unless you get a job immediately, you could be going bankrupt. So what are some things that people can do if they're in that situation to kind of protect themselves?
Sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. 76% of America is living paycheck to paycheck. And of those people, a $500 emergency room bill would they wouldn't have enough cash in their account to be able to afford that. So I totally get that's the majority of America, and that's really where my motivation comes in to help people, because I'm like, it doesn't have to be that way. Even though it seems difficult, we can create a plan to get you from living at the margins to living in a better situation. The interesting thing is, most people, when I sit down with people, they don't have a coordinated plan. They say, well, I want to buy this real estate, or, my brother told me I need to get involved in this. And I'm like, no. You can't play basketball on a court full of quicksand. If you don't have a solid foundation, you can't shoot for the 3-pointers. So the first thing we do is number one, we look at your budget. Number one, bar none, and that's one of the giveaways that I'll have today for your audience, is something called a personal financial inventory. And that's a 1-page worksheet that's going to help you figure out where everything is and what everything is worth. Your assets, your liabilities, your income, and your expenses. And that's going to give you a snapshot of how healthy your financial household is. If your liabilities are more than your assets, meaning what you owe to other people is more than what you own, well, that's a negative net worth, and that just means we have some work to do. Ultimately, you want to have a positive net worth. What you own is worth more than you owe to other people. Same thing with income and expenses. What you bring in should be more than what you give out and pay out in expenses. But ultimately, some people live beyond their means and pay out in expenses more than they take in. So we work together to really figure out how much you have and where everything is worth, and how much capacity, your financial fuel, left over every month to be able to fuel your goals. And so what we do is we take that financial fuel and we figure out what to do with it. Even if it's $50 a month or $100 a month, we got to have something, to fuel your plan. And that's where we say, okay, let's take the $50 a month and create a plan for it, or $100 a month and create a plan for it. If you're 25 years old and you need $1 million by the time you're 65 years old, it's going to take $150 a month to get there, assuming a 10% rate of return, and we can argue whether that's feasible or not. But if you're 55 years old and you wait until 55 years old to invest, it's going to take you $4,500 a month from 55 to 65 to get $1 million. So I'm not saying that $1 million is what you need, and I'm not saying you can get a 10% rate of return. All I'm saying is that starting young, starting early, saving a little bit can go a long way. And in my book, I talk about a lot of different examples of that. But, really, ultimately, figuring out what you have the capacity to afford, and then what do you do with that money going forward. And then we talk about, which we already talked about, is emergency reserves, making sure that you have adequate money in the bank to withstand a catastrophe. And ultimately, we got to look at insurance. If you had tons of money and millions of dollars, maybe you don't need insurance because you could self-insure. But if you're living on the margins already and you're about to tip over and you have one little gust of wind that blows you over because there's a negative, bad situation, you got to make sure you insure to protect against that catastrophe. So we look at your budget and your personal financial inventory. Then we look at your emergency funds, and then we create an insurance plan to manage risk as it relates to that. And then we figure out, what do you do with the leftover money? Pay off debt, invest for retirement. We carve out different plans for the different goals that you have. But I think that's really what it needs to start with, is how much capacity do you have? And then from there, what do you want to do with that? And ultimately protecting you against an emergency or a catastrophe, and then playing offense with the rest of the money.
Gotcha. So you kind of alluded to the second question I had, which was, working with younger people, like what should they be doing? You talked about it's $150 a month to get to your $1 million retirement nest egg. So working from a younger person's perspective, and maybe they're not making the capacity that they're going to make earning wise later in life. So for any of our younger people who might be watching, what are some of the things that you might give them to do to get to that $150 kind of goal number, to hopefully get them started on the path to actual real savings for retirement?
That's a really good question, because young people, I think, have a bigger advantage than older people in that, if you can walk with me for a second, in that they have so much capacity and so much time on their side, even though they might not feel like they're making tons of money. Traditionally, younger people make less money than older people do, because as you get older, you get more in income and you get more seasoned. And, let's say you're making $40,000 or $50,000 a year when you're younger, and then you make $100,000 a year when you're in your 50s, and that trajectory keeps going up. But I think the biggest thing, more so than money, is time. Because we just talked about it, it takes just $150 a month to get that $1 million. So time and compound interest will work on your side. And interestingly enough, that $150 a month doesn't all have to come from you. It can come from an employer who's potentially matching your contributions. So if they're matching, dollar for dollar, then maybe you put in $75 a month and they put in $75 a month because there's an employer match. So companies usually will match a 401k, which means now my 25-year-old only needs to put away $75 a month. Taking that one step further, we're looking at taxes. Taxes are a very interesting thing. I just did a presentation to a government agency a couple months ago, and we talked about the marshmallow experiment. Have you ever heard of the marshmallow experiment?
Yeah, it was the little kids, and they're looking at marshmallows, like now versus later.
Exactly. And so, 5-year-olds sit down and they're given the opportunity, do you want to have one marshmallow now or 2 marshmallows if you come back and not touch this marshmallow? And they're like, some are like, yeah, I'll take the 2 marshmallows. Other kids, maybe my son, would probably just take the 1 marshmallow, just because it's sitting right in front of them. So how that relates to taxes is most people just want deductions. I need to lower my taxes because I don't want to pay taxes. What you forget is that when you retire, you're going to pay Uncle Sam those taxes. You forgot that the deduction today now means taxable income in the future. Well, you might argue, well, I'll be in a lower tax bracket and it'll be end up okay. Well, one of the things you could do is you could pay your taxes now. You don't have to eat that marshmallow today. You'll get your 2 marshmallows in the future. So for somebody who's younger, who might have longer time horizon, they might say, you know what, I'm going to take my $75 a month and I'm going to put that in a Roth. And maybe now, because I'm going to put it in a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA, I don't get any tax deduction today, so I'm gonna be at a slight disadvantage now. But when I retire, it's all tax-free income and all tax-free money. So maybe instead of it being $75 a month, I only need to save $50 a month, because now that $50 a month is growing tax-free. So when I retire, I don't need $1 million to retire on. I only need $750,000, because the $750,000 is all tax-free, whereas the $1 million is now taxable, and I'm going to have to pay Uncle Sam. So I worked out the calculation. I did a George Jetson versus Mr. Spacely analysis one time, and I said, if George Jetson puts his money in the Roth, and if Mr. Spacely puts his money in a traditional, how much money would they need to have in their retirement plans to be able to fund $100,000 a year in 30 years? And it worked out that George Jetson only needed like $1.5 million, and Mr. Spacely needed $3 million to live the lifestyle that they want in retirement. And I know those numbers sound like a lot, but we're talking about future dollars in 20 or 30 years. So really how it boils down to our conversation is maybe you pay the taxes now in favor of having tax-free money in the future. So for younger people, I would say take advantage of your employer match, make sure that you're saving early, and look at Roth as an alternative to your traditional retirement plans.
Gotcha. So at the very beginning of our conversation, you talked about when you took your money and invested in the stock market. So there's something just really sexy about making money in the stock market. When is that kind of investing appropriate? And when should we be doing other things besides that? To me, it would be so much fun to invest in something and, a couple of years down the road, it does, like that whole Amazon Whole Foods situation this last week, which, sounds super exciting had I owned Whole Foods stock, and now, possibly I have a lot more money. So I know that's appropriate sometimes and sometimes not. So when are those times?
So really good question. So 2 parts to that question, and I'll take the first part first. Everybody wants to eat dessert. Nobody wants to eat their vegetables, right? So if you ate dessert every meal of the day, then you would not be very healthy. So same thing with stock investing. If you played the stock market all the time and never focused on any other part of your financial plan, you'd be very financially unhealthy. So yeah, it makes sense to eat dessert sometimes, but in moderate doses and in the appropriate amounts of time. You don't eat dessert before you get your dinner. You don't eat dessert before your dinner. You don't eat dessert in the morning, that type of thing. So I think stock investing is appropriate in a well-balanced financial plan as it relates to a ultimate financial goal. Interestingly enough, everybody wants to buy Amazon and Whole Foods and Instagram and all these companies, but let's pretend like you won the jackpot and you were right and you picked the right stock. What is that going to do for you? What's the purpose of that? And that's one of the things that I stress in the book is, who cares? Yeah, okay, so you made $1,000. You won the big one. You hit the lottery. You put $500 in. You made you doubled your money. Okay, what are you going to do with that money? Yeah. Is that going to revolutionize your financial plan? Probably not. It'd be fun, but it's not going to change your plan. Now, the more money you invest, the more money you could make, but there's a lot more risk involved, and playing around with your nest egg and with your plan, that's where we start to get into the dessert conversation. So I think it makes sense to invest in the stock market if you have a long-term time horizon where you can afford the ups and downs, where, if you're wrong and you lose, that's okay, because you've got 20 years until you're going to need this money. So, when we're looking at, we create financial plans for a variety of different goals. Some are short-term, some are mid-term, and some are long-term. If you have a short-term time horizon of maybe 2 to 5 years, you probably don't want to put that money in the stock market. Maybe you want to buy a house. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to send your kids to college in 5 years or in 3 years. Maybe you scale back your risky investing in the short-term time horizon because you can't afford to navigate the ups and downs of the market. In your midterm goals, maybe those are 5 to 20 years away. Maybe it is college. Maybe it's buying a house, a second home, buying a business. Whatever that 5 to 15-year time horizon is, maybe you can afford to invest in the markets. And again, if you're wrong and if you lose and if the market crashes, it's okay because you are 10 years away from your goal and you could substantiate that. If you're long-term on that, then I actually probably would recommend investing in the markets, because if you kept all of your retirement money in a money market account, you're probably going to lose time value of money and you're going to lose inflation. So the stock market is a really good inflation protector, and it's a really good way to grow your money on a long-term basis. And so some desserts could be fruit, right? So some stock investing can actually be healthy for you if you do it in an appropriate manner, in a diversified, risk-managed way, as opposed to eating chocolate all the time and buying the hot stock of the day. So I think, I know I'm kind of going off a little bit, but I really want to put into perspective that stock investing is not bad, but it's not necessarily good for you either if you don't do it in the right way. You have to use it in the right manner.
Yeah, I think your dessert analogy is perfect for that because, obviously you can't just eat dessert all the time.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to assume in your book you have kind of signposts or, parts of the puzzle that, like the outside rim of the puzzle would be the thing you start with. So I'm going to assume that you have signposts. So like emergency fund and college fund and retirement and all of these things that are kind of like huge overall goals. Can you kind of walk us through like the typical process maybe of, okay, do this first, then do this thing, then do this thing?
Sure. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I actually say that in the book, is that there's no right way to do it because everybody's situation is so unique. But I will say, as I said before, that you really need to understand where you are financially today, because that's really going to help you put everything else into perspective. So, for example, if you had $1 million in your IRA, well, maybe your retirement goal might be, you might not want to put as much emphasis on your retirement goal, and you might want to put more emphasis on a different goal. So in the book, I have chapters on insurances, life, disability, long-term care, health insurance, and then I go into taxes and estate planning. And, a lot of people think, well, I need an estate to plan for. I need to have wealth, right? Not necessarily. You might just have your house and a life insurance policy. And if you passed away, that's what your kids are going to inherit. And maybe a retirement plan too. And there's some estate planning involved in that. And so you want to make sure that you coordinate all of your beneficiaries and that the tax implications of passing money to the next generation are reviewed. And then we look at business ownership. We haven't talked much about that, but as many of your audience has, maybe a book business or a separate other business that they want to grow and develop, and there's a whole section on building out your business as part of your financial plan. And then the third part of the book is all about fitting the pieces together for all these different unique situations. I go into divorcees. I talk about divorcees, and I talk about dual income with no kids, and then I talk about the modern family and all these different unique situations where a lot of financial planners don't really go into much depth on, and it's not as cookie cutter as you might think. And so there's a lot more nuance to each of the different financial planning puzzle pieces if you're in one of those unique situations, federal employees or private sector employees versus working for yourself and a business owner. And then the last chapter focuses all about your missing financial puzzle piece, and that's hiring a financial planner. And a lot of people reject that because they're expensive and, I got to make sure I trust them. And there's all this regulation and fiduciaries and everything. And so the chapter talks all about the value of hiring an advisor and how to go about interviewing an advisor and finding one that fits well with you. Because ultimately, if they're ethical and they know what they're doing, we all kind of do very similar stuff. You just want to make sure that you jive with them and that they fit your personality. And really, you want to know what the financial services industry looks like post the Department of Labor ruling at June 9th. I don't know how much you guys have heard about the Department of Labor ruling on June 9th, but there's a whole slew of new regulations that are coming from that. But beside the point, I think it just is a good way to educate, be an educated consumer as you're interviewing an advisor and a financial coach to really help you get what you want out of life financially. And so the guideposts throughout the book are really helping you to pace yourself so that you're not overwhelmed by everything, but you are moving forward in the right direction.
Right. That's so great. I love how you've made it so comprehensive but relatable at the same time, so it really talks about different situations and stages and, kind of takes a holistic approach to finances. So you as a financial advisor, how have you used your book in your business to kind of, promote your business or help your clients? How are you using it?
Sure, that's a really good question. Right actually before our call today, I actually had someone call me up who said, I just got an inheritance and I don't really know what to do with it. Can you just send me like some information about what you guys do and maybe how I can work with you? And I said, absolutely, I'd be happy to do that. And so I have my book here, and I'm going to be mailing this out along with a nice little cover note and some information. And it's a nice little, everyone says it's a good business card, but I believe it's not just a business card. It's really if somebody wants to improve their financial life and they don't really know where to go, this is really everything that you would get with an advisor. I'd say 80% of it is in here. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer and you don't want to hire an advisor, you could do it yourself through here. Interestingly enough, that's not one of the core competencies of an advisor. It's not because, the information that we have, we have information, but the information is online. So you could Google it and find out the information. You got to be careful in what you see out there. But I believe a core competency of an advisor is the relationship that you have and that the communication between the client and the advisor and putting this information into perspective for you. So it's a great little, leave behind or a great way to strike a conversation or build a relationship. It gives me a little credibility because that I wrote the book on it. But I think ultimately my job isn't undercut by the book. And I think a lot of people fear that if they give away too much information, that their business will suffer. And I don't believe that at all. I know that people are do-it-yourselfers and can get this information other places too. So don't fear giving away too much information is kind of what I was sharing. But that's one way. I've gone to different events. I've done presentations. I did book signings. Just getting out in the community and meeting people. When I first started in my business, the president of the firm, he said, just get out there and see somebody and say something. Just get out and meet people and network. And that's what business development is all about, is just meeting people, growing, building relationships. And the book allows me to just get out there in another thing to talk about. And I use it as an asset or a arrow in my quiver. It's just another thing that I've done in my career that I can come out and say, I'm a CFP, I'm a fiduciary, I help people, I've been doing this for 13 years, and I have a book, just keeps growing and building my career and building my resume. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it sure does. And the thing that I like about what you've said is that you could have, he says, send me a packet, send me some info. You could have sent a whole bunch of slick brochures, just like any other guy would have done. And so then he has all this marketing material, but he doesn't really have any good concept of who you are or your plan or, your heart, basically. So, being able to send him a hardback copy of your book, Use the Expert, is fantastic. The second thing that I like about that is that you've educated your potential client now. So now your client can come to you and say, hey, I read in the book about this thing and that thing. I'd love to talk to you more about that information. So now you've saved yourself, in theory, you've saved yourself quite a bit of time trying to explain why this is important and, all the ins and outs of this particular thing that now you guys are going to be talking about. So, it's really a win-win for everyone. And just a huge value to your client, and really a value to you too. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. And one other thing I was going to note, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and I can't remember which one, but they said always make sure that when you send somebody a book, you write the handwritten note in the book, sign it, but then highlight or note the page numbers in the book that might apply to their situation. So in this specific situation, the person who's receiving an inheritance, I'm going to say, hey, make sure you check out chapter whatever or page whatever on inheritance.
Oh, that is
and then
so
they're going to look at that and be like, oh, wow, this relates to me, because, financial advice is so broad. And so if I can pinpoint the specific page that's going to relate to them, it's going to go a long way.
Yeah. Just another kind of an easy way for you to add value, but what great value to your potential client. That's great. That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
All right, so I feel like we've talked for quite some time. It's been over 35 minutes, and I think I asked you for 20, so we maybe want to wrap up now.
Sure. Yeah, no, this has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love talking about financial planning, and I love just communicating and just getting the word out and trying to really change the world and help people with their finances, just one person at a time. So if I can just make one person motivated to get out there and grow their financial plan, that's really all that makes a difference to me. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, you do have a freebie for us today, and you did talk about it a little bit, but this is a one-page worksheet to help you identify where everything is and what everything's worth. So that sounds really useful and valuable for us, and I'll have information about how to get that in the show notes. So Jason, any last minute advice or tips or anything you'd like us to know before we go?
I would just say that financial planning, it can get quite overwhelming sometimes, and having a plan in place, having someone by your side to coach you through life's challenges can really help you take life's question marks and turn them into exclamation marks, so that you're moving your life in the right direction. And really, money isn't the end all be all, but it sure does help. And if your money situation is taken care of, then you can now focus on bigger and better things: family, charity, community, building yourself and growing and helping people. And that's really what I try and do, is just help people become the best versions of themselves.
Oh, I love it. Sounds wonderful. I love the questions into exclamation marks. Yeah. That's perfect.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you once again for being with us today. It's been my pleasure to get to speak with you.
Thank you very much.